broader range of sources. Of course, central sources from Moscow and from the main big institutions in charge of designing policies and legal policies. Of course, the Central Committee, its various departments dealing with the question of legal procedures, the Ministry of Justice, the main prosecutor's office, the Supreme Court, and several other actors in Moscow. She looked also in some of the funds of the economical archives in Moscow, the Российский государственный архив экономики. But she decided to have also a closer look to the topic of the study, and for that purpose she went to Kiev and she looked into Republican level documentation. Notably, she had access to quite rare documents, the judiciary file created by the political police, because some cases of depending on criminal law, were prosecuted by the political police, not by the prosecutor's office, when it was state crimes, or we also know them as counter-revolutionary crimes. So for this, one big case, notably that she looked into in the chapter 4 of the book, the Hain case, which was a trial that was held in Kiev in 1952, she found the very voluminous case file of a trial and investigation in the archives of the State Security Ministry of Ukraine. So one of the questions I would like to ask you about this already, as we see, rich heterogeneous documentation is what especially the latter kind of documentation, the documentation emanating from this political police and its, let's say, specific way of creating knowledge, bring something really new to the picture you already managed to get of your topic from the documents of Moscow Central Archive or Kiev administrative, let's call them that way, archives. Finally, there is a collection of documents that are very precious and that are dealt in detail in the chapter 5 of the book, which she calls the voices of the thieves themselves. She accessed a collection of requests in pardon from a little less than 200 citizens who had been condemned under the law of 1947 against economic crime. And she analyzes this corpus, looking into who were these people asking for pardon to the Supreme Soviet, the Presidium of the Supreme Soviet of the Soviet Union, what they did, how they presented their crime or deed or offense, and why, for which reasons they asked for liberation or revision or their annulation, consentment of their sentence. Through these documents, it's possible to glimpse into also some values, or what they let us see. What were the principles for them of fair trial, fair justice, etc. At this moment, of course, we can note that on the one hand, so I stop a little bit on this specific chapter also because the type of source is very unusual. There is, on the one hand, an appearance of adherence, of acceptance of this new norm of socialist property by the people asking for pardon. But, on the other hand, the defendant, the condemned people, claimed the right, in several cases, to mitigating circumstances. Which mitigating circumstances? Hunger, dire scarcity, that would explain that they had to commit pilfering, little small theft, the misery of their family, sometimes they were the paterfamilias, the people feeding the family, or some other such mitigating circumstances. In that regard, they considered that this concept of socialist property was in fact relative, and its sacrality depended in fact on the circumstances of someone impinging on it. We can ask if they really understood this concept as at least Stalin wanted them to understand it. Another attitude that they display sometimes in these documents is the assertion that the law had been too severe toward them. And here, obviously, the main gap, the main rift appeared between poor people who committed crimes of survival, a theft of survival, of necessity, and the figure of the big embezzler, the public official who used state money in various purposes, the worst of them being selfish purposes, self-enrichment, for instance. So here, obviously, if we go back to the question of the adequacy between the law and the shared sentiment of the population, we see a discrepancy. Because how those people could understand that they have been tried sometimes to very harsh penalty in the Stalinian Gulag, long terms of Gulag, same long terms of Gulag as big embezzlers who committed their crimes not out of starvation but out of some kind of desire to enrich themselves. Finally, some of them, and it's very interesting when you notice that those who distanced themselves the most from the regime were those who testified of how the inhuman conditions of life in the Gulag really created a divorce, in some way, political divorce between these defendants and the regime who condemned them to this sentencing. So I already have this question. I've got more later, but if you already want to discuss.
You have to, to be here, and I will show my PowerPoint afterwards.
Okay, thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to discuss with Juliette Cadiot, who is a visiting professor at the Department of History here in Turin, and it's really a pleasure. It's a pleasure because this is an important book, which is based on enormous research. Vanessa already has given a sense of what this book is about, of the issues involved. I would first say its property, its legality, is how theft, stealing is punished, but through this is a lens, this is a viewpoint to look at how Soviet society works, or at least it suggests many issues, doubts, questions about it work, because it involves not only codification, enforcement, litigation and how it happens, so what happens to go to a tribunal or to a court to defend or not defend. It is about economics and how the Soviet economy works. So I'll raise just a few questions deliberately in a blunt way. I'm not suggesting I agree with any of the hypotheses, but I state them bluntly to give Juliette the space to share with us her thinking about these more general questions. The first one is a typical classic question in Russian history. In Russian, произвол, or законность, that is arbitrariness or legality, as these two poles. What this very, very deep study in the practice of legality suggests. Or to put the same question in a different way, even after Stalin, does this become a socialist legality, or can we speak of a socialist legality, and if so, in which ways? Meaning, of course, this is a brutal regime. The two decrees that Vanessa mentioned, 1932 and 1947, punished stealing in an extremely harsh way. In 32, if I remember correctly, between 10 years of prison until death penalty. And both decrees came after famines, so when people needed to survive.
And stealing.
And steal. Yeah. And so they needed to steal to survive. And then when the regime stabilizes, so to speak, does this become a kind of legality which is based on principles that we might like or dislike, but are somewhat clear. Property is socialist. I know if I do something, something will happen, but the rule is stable, in this sense, legality. So the question is, what do you think about this general issue? Second issue is, second question, does this fit into the interpretative paradigm of imperial legal rights? And I explain for those who are listening, there is the whole interpretative tradition that, to put it very simply, says, okay, there are types of polities or states that are called empires. Only the sovereign, or in this case, Stalin, are the ones who can make a law. But once the law is made, it's differentiated, it's plural, it's flexible. So in many ways, according to certain interpretations, this gives the population, the individuals, groups, the ability to participate in legal activities, to take part in administration of law, so to speak. So the question would be, do you think the case you studied so deeply fits into this, and if so, why or why not? Third question, law or legality and the economy. There is a whole beautiful part in your book in which you describe the supervising agencies, so to speak. At a certain point you mentioned the number of 380,000 informers who are spread into different institutions at the local level, just like spies, like agentura in Russian. There is a special section in the political police for economic crimes. This special section has agents, secret agents, almost, no, actually, secret agents, who are supposed to report and say who is stealing property or not. It seems to me this is interesting because this is not just a planned economy. A planned economy means that there is an institution called Gosplan, which at the center says this enterprise has to produce this much and this much, and then organs that are supposed to verify that this happened. But this is not just, let me put it this way, not just a planned economy. It seems a police economy, in which the police is spying internally on the economy and the population. Is this rational in economic terms? More question. In here, I like to quote one of the sentences of the conclusion of your, there is a beautiful chapter in which Juliette Cadiot examines the discourse about stealing, analyzing a sample, I believe 200 cases of cases in which someone who had been convicted of stealing socialist property asks to be pardoned. And so it argues why the state should pardon that person. So it gives you a sense of how people, or at least this sample of people, think about property. And at the end of this chapter, you say, or ask the question, does theft become compensation or a channel of social redistribution chosen by the Soviets for the effort that they had made according to unwritten shared norms? When we say effort made after the Second World War, we mean enormous sacrifice and hardships. So seems to be, at least you ask this as a possibility, as a question, stealing becomes always something that it's a reward for the sacrifices that have been done. And so here the question is, do you think that ultimately, despite all the discipline, the hardships, etc., this way of thinking about property is shared, becomes part of the mentality, regardless of the authorities, or at least together with the message that the authorities are spreading? And final question, looking at this with detachment, so to say, in the scope of, well, Russian and Soviet history, does this look like a success or a failure? And of course, we have to define what we mean by success or failure, but let's leave aside moral judgments. This is a brutal regime, there is no question about that. But thinking in terms of its survival, how this regime managed to command an enormous loyalty during the Second World War. So this way of organizing society in which, in a way, stealing socialist property is a very serious crime and very harshly punished. At the same time, everybody steals, even at the top. Could this help explaining the stability? I'm thinking after Stalin also, especially. And I'm closing with just one remark. In my opinion, readers should read this book to understand also the privatizations of the 1990s. And let me put it this way, in a kind of a blunt way. This kind of research, this kind of book, it seems to me, it helps us understand the privatization and what happened in the privatization of the 90s much more than categories such as neoliberalism or Washington consensus, or at least should be part of the picture. Thank you very much for I believe now, that's right, you have to switch chairs.
Yeah. Thank you very much to everybody. I hope you will understand my wonderful English, but normally for the Italian is not so bad.
We all speak English as a foreign language.
Yeah. No, but with the German is not good. With the Italian, we will see at the end of the... no, I wanted just to... I have a kind of PowerPoint, if it's open. Okay, it's okay. I wanted first of all to thank you. Okay, it's presentazione. Okay, this one is not important. Okay. 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 I wanted to thank you, first of all, Alberto Masoero, for this kind invitation to come in Torino. I am very happy to be here, and to thank Vanessa for reading of my book. And thank you for your question, of course. I wanted just to start, maybe I will respond to the question, don't worry. I don't I just want to start a little bit about my own research process, how I came to this question, and why it seems to me very important. And as Alberto told us, there were two laws we punish socialist property. And you have here a flyer of the first law, which was in 1932. In 1932, it was decided during the famine to or kill someone who will steal something, or to send it to the Gulag for 10 years. And you see in this poster, it was a very publicized law. And this law was really wanted by Stalin. Stalin said, oh, they are stealing everywhere, especially in the countryside, especially in Ukraine. We have to stop it. And we have to write a law by which someone who is stealing, especially in the countryside, will take 10 years of Gulag or to be shot. And it's some photograph of the people who were stealing during the famine in Ukraine. They were, well, this one, they were terrible. And there were another law in 47, which a reiteration of the same law, which means that if you are a thief, you will get to the Gulag for 7 to 25 years. While you are a thief of socialist property. And once again, it's Stalin who decides that during the famine, it's important to enforce this new law. I came across this law because I was just working a lawyer, the history of the Soviet lawyer, and I was doing some work on the Ministry of Justice archives, and I was very surprised to what extent this law of 32 and 47 was everywhere. That means it was a kind of, they were speaking not so much about the political detainees or political prisoners, but they were talking a lot about these thieves. This thief of socialist property. And I decided just to look at this question. We knew that this law were public, we knew about this law, but there were no monography on this law. Or it was important also because these detainees for theft were a quarter of the prisoner in the Gulag camps. And when you think about the Gulag, you don't think that there should be these thieves. You think, oh, it's political detainees, but the majority of people in the Gulag camp were thieves. And finally, and after I will respond to the question, I finally was, when I encountered during my stay in Moscow or Petersburg or Kiev people, and because I was writing a book on the Gulag, and I was just telling that I was writing on the Gulag, the people said, oh yeah, moja babushka sидela, which means my grandmother was in the Gulag. And I said, but for what? Oh, we don't really know, she took something, because at the time it was very difficult to survive. That means that there is this presence of thievery, there is a presence of these small thieves, but it was not really, there were no monography. There are not even this wonderful association memorial. They don't have an interview project with these people. And in my view, it was important to do something with that. That means that to try to return to the archives, and it was a time where it was possible to work especially in the procuracy and the party archives in Moscow, which is not possible now, and also in Kiev. It was very open for the KGB archives. And I encountered a tremendous amount of materials. I understood why nobody was writing a monograph on this topic. It was just so huge. And I also encountered a vision of the Stalin society, which was very different of what I thought. That means that it was the cases, all these judiciary archives, we were not so much studied at the time. That means Vanessa Voisin studied these wonderful judiciary archives. Of course, when you do history, you know that judiciary archives are extremely rich in terms of social history. But in the case of Soviet Union, it was not really made. And okay, that means that I wanted just to introduce how I came across this topic and why he was important for me. Now I will just respond to the first question. First of all, it was a question by Vanessa about the chapter 4 or 5, I don't remember, the case study. The 5. I have a micro study of one case. As Italian, you may know to what extent microstoria is important for us, and to what extent it was for me. I came across a big embezzlement case in the Moscow archives, and I had the chance to get an archivist in Kiev. We make the file available. The file is 3,500 pages, but it's fun to read, but it's long to read. And it is about a merchant, how to say that, he's a businessman in Kiev, a Jewish businessman in Kiev, and a corrupted Jewish businessman in Kiev, who was a figure of corruption, embezzlement, and impunity, which was quite common at the time. What is interesting in this case that normally he should be pursued and punished as a thief, but finally he was convinced as a saboteur, and he was shot. It was after the war, or normally you don't shoot for economic crimes. And through this case, I was able to really enter the life of kind of businessman, very active. And why I choose to have one case study, because it makes it possible to show to what extent economic crimes was at the center of social networks in the economy at the time, especially after the war, to what extent it was not only corrupted, but it was to be corrupted, that means it was essential in order to make functioning the system. And this, my hero, Hein, you have his face. Ah, no, not here, sorry. Okay. Hein was very close to the party, very close to the police, very close to all the high society in Kiev, but finally it was the KGB who took him, and I use this case in order really to try to enter the matrix of impunity on economic crimes in the afterwar period. That's the first question. The second question seems to me is close to another question by Alberto. It was about the success of this value. Now, Stalin in 1932 decided that socialist property, which means public property, which means state property, the property which is not private, which is not personal, all this property should be protected in Soviet Union as a private property is in all the legal system in Western, in capitalist societies. The idea was to make it sacred and well protected by laws and by the police. And it was not very easy for the people to understand it, because what is public property? Woods, for example, you need it, or a record in the cours. What is the limit of what is your own property, or by you use to get it, or something which is state property? And this law by Stalin was really the idea to put socialist property at the center of the juridical system. It was known, that means that there is nothing new in saying that, but I took it more seriously. It is not just empty words. I mean, to what extent, because there is this law which were very severe, the people had to understand that now they have to think when they take something. They have to think, if maybe I can go to the Gulag, or maybe it's not very important because we are all stealing. It was a way to impose a value, but the value is a bad word. Maybe it was a way to discipline people. It was really a kind of disciplinary enterprise to make the people double think about things. About what you have around, what you can take. And of course, it was a period of scarcity. It was a period in the cours you have no salary, you have no money, and if you are dying, you have to wait in order to take the flower, yeah. The flower of by the cours, the president. That means that it's something when you think as a peasant is difficult to understand. That means that you are dying. You are the one we did everything to get something to eat, but you have to wait because it is state property. Alors, it's more kind of disciplinary enterprise. And to finish with your question, Alberto, I think that to what extent it was a failure of success. I think it was a success to the extent that At the beginning, the law of the 32 and 47 laws were very enforced, and very quickly they decide to distinguish, and the judge has to be more, has to be nicer for the poor. And there is also the work, there is a kind of negotiation between lawyers and the police, and there is no regulation to say that the very poor, finally, you could be claimant. And after Stalin's death, it is obvious. All the poor thieves are, they go out of the gulag, and there is a big amnesty, and the thieves were the first one to be liberated. And after Stalin, there is this kind of there is the idea that you can steal a certain amount, but not twice, not 3 times, not all of it, or there is some item is not good to steal, but there is a more subtle penal system. But the idea that state property belonging was state property was there. That means that there is not the same kind of, there is something which the state could more or less manage. After, about the later, you have that's the same for this notion of that it is fair or not fair. I mean that at the beginning is not fair because there is some habit. Normally you are a peasant, you take. It's not fair also to be sent to the gulag in 10 years is never very fair. Actually, it's ridiculous to say. But in the mentality of the time, the idea that you have to be sent to the gulag if you are maybe a bourgeois or if you are really an enemy of the people, but these people, especially the small thieves, the poor thieves, they are part of the social layers of the society, which normally are protected by the socialist state, and they don't understand how they finish in the gulag. But actually, the corrupt functionaries, they don't understand either why they finish to the gulag, and I don't think anybody can understand why they finish to the gulag. But okay, that's one. There were also a very good question about to what extent, and the formula I will repeat now. Was it a plan economy or a police economy? I think that it was totally a police economy, and I think also that one of the results of these laws were it kept the power, the Politburo and the police informed of what was going on in the economy. Planification doesn't work very well. There are not. I have some anecdote about about discussion in the Council of Ministry where they have data where in billion or million. That means that there is a problem of 100 million, and the other no. It seems to me that it's billions, which is not the same. Normally, you don't say these kind of things in the Council of Ministry, I guess, especially in a kind of very scientific Stalinist power. That means that it's difficult for them to handle, and we don't. It's something which is worked a little bit, but it seems to me that even the book and. Unfortunately, now the archives are closed in Russia, but really to try to enter the matrix of the Stalinist economy is incredible because it's very liberal. There is a lot of entrepreneurs. Lawyer play some role. That means it's really an image. Even as a specialist, I didn't have before reading the archives. Is why the judiciary archives are so important to bring in the general historiographical discussion. And I think this police economy is really the term. That means that they try to manage the economy by penal law, and also they try to be informed about their habit and about who could be too corrupt to be influential, or not corrupt enough and it's not a big deal, and you can put some impunity for him. And it's also about this network of surveillance, but everywhere in the factories. That means that there is really this idea of policing in terms of information and of course enforcement and punishment. Okay, and now there is also another question about this imperial legal right. It's very complicated because there is a tendency till recently to see imperial legality as something quite flexible and positive. And I think during Stalin it was also flexible, but sometimes flexibility is highly negative because it's arbitrariness. That means that it is a way to terrorize. That means that when you have a judiciary system which is very difficult to understand, and there is too many norms, nobody is really able to follow them or even to know them, because a lot of documentation are secret. There is a kind of confusion, and you know that you can be, that punishment is possible. But you always also hope that some bargaining is possible. And you have this curious matrix where there is a lot of discussion about law, or how to avoid the law, or what is fair, about legality, in a kind of legality not as it is written, but legality in the English way of saying it, and legality is the idea of fairness. And we have this kind of discussion a lot. And it was the same during the imperial period. Is why the requests to the imperator of the Senate were so important to study, and it is the same for the Soviet period. After the harshness of the Stalinist period, even just the fact that 3% of the population was in the Gulag, adult population was in the Gulag at the time, is something which is also different with the imperial period, but another thing. Okay, and after about there were another thing about I think I respond also about this arbitrariness and legality. That means that this idea that is once again is how do you define legality? I really think that at the time, even if there is an effort by the lawyer to write the doctrine to be more subtle in terms of implementing law, to try to make the poor not to be punished as severely as the rich and so on, even if there is the law was more sophisticated at the end of this process. Nonetheless, it is a very clumsy system yet, and there is a lot of kind of illegal gray zone bargaining. And thank you again for your readings.
What do we do? Maybe shall we collect questions, or as I said, no one here speaks English as a first language, and we speak English to understand each other. Go ahead.
Io capisco l'italiano.
Okay, that's right. Questions can be asked in Italian and Russian as well. I see the Russian students, of course.
It's okay? Here? Ok, meglio così, sì. c'est meglio così. So I think there's one fascinating aspect also in your study that we haven't yet spoken about is the role of intermediaries, mediators, actors between who are part of both power and society. So of course this division is not really valid anymore, as we know, but those who are in the prosecutor's office, those who are in the party committee, those who are at various levels of these agencies, and who can sometimes alleviate a little bit the penalty of somebody or the sentence of somebody, who can help you explain in the process of appeal of a sentence in the ordinary line of law, not the military tribunal line of hierarchy of tribunals, but in the civil ordinary line of tribunals. You can appeal to the higher instance right after receiving your sentence, or you can later appeal in the order of revision process. And in these procedures, you show that if you are a member of a party, a communist party, or if you are somebody working for an important ministry, or if you are a military, you can appeal to your corporation in a way, and to receive the help of this corporation, to try to advance a little bit your file, and to try to have your appeal really examined and studied seriously. And you show quite convincing that it changes a lot with statistics at the end, but the exiting of your appeal revision. So this is the first thing. And the second thing is also through these intermediary actors, you raise also a big question in the Soviet historiography of the 30s especially, about the existence of these regional networks, semi-criminal, and against which Stalin would have wanted to fight during the Great Terror, notably the Great Purge, so that the fury of Getty. But more generally, indeed, there were where was the power, in fact, besides Stalin? There were other actors and agencies to which citizens could turn and try to negotiate, in fact, their fate, and that's the thing that you show very well. So if you could say a little more about that, it would be interesting. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the question. Maybe I should precise that in this book, and because of these laws, I study some cases of very poor thieves, but also I study cases of very influential people who were caught, because it's through judiciary archives, as thieves as well. That means that you have all the strata of the society. You have all the hierarchy of the society, not just the poor. We are not protected, but also party members. Well, they are all party members actually. The leadership of the Soviet Union, and there were a system which was organized of impunity, which means that at the time when you are a party member, you couldn't be arrested. The policeman who wants to arrest you, you just show your party membership card, and he has to wait that the party decided to expel you, and it's a very complex procedure. Normally, the prosecutor could just open a case, but most of the time, the party will get a meeting about this guy who was taken as stealing, and say, no, we don't think that you should prosecute him. And there is this tension at the local level, regional level, between the procuracy and the party. And when you are a party member, especially if you are from the leadership, you are more protected than an ordinary citizen. And they discuss about it. They say, oh, it's bad, normally there is equality and so on. Nonetheless, this regulation stood. It's very interesting also because in terms of thinking about this autocratic regime, and it is the same for imperial period, and I think we can also follow this same path nowadays in the Putin Russia. There is this difficulty for the top down to control the intermediaries. These intermediaries normally they have huge power. When you have a regional party boss, you have a very now in Russia it's a governor. You have and in Imperial Russia also you have a very big power. And as Ekaterina Pravilova has shown, for the imperial period, there were no really administrative means in order to put this agent in kind of, in English, it's the idea of accountability of this agent. That means they are responsible, and the ordinary people can take action against them. There were always a problem in Russia with this problem of accountability of this layer of the hierarchy. And you see exactly the same process here, and even under Stalin. Of course, Stalin, when he wants someone to go to jail, he will go to jail. There is no problem with that. But there were the fact that you were protected by the party, you are protected the party before your arrestation, and after also when you want to be pardoned, or as Vanessa mentioned, when you want to be pardoned, you have just to send a letter to various agencies, and but when your letter came from someone which is powerful, the letter will be very attentively examined, and not most of the time, but more often, you will get pardoned. That means that there is a kind of system of patronage inside the judiciary system, and inside the police system as well, and which means that the problem of accountability was still not resolved in terms of law at the time.
Is it okay if I speak from here? If there are no questions from the public, I try to follow up, thinking in general on the basis of your work. The role, the personal role in exercising power. Because in the imperial period, you have a similar dichotomy, you see, from the codification of Speransky, 1832, there is a major attempt of ruling by law, issuing laws. The monarch is the only one who can make a law, but once the law is enacted, it is holy, it's sacred, and it's also very difficult to change. So one hypothesis I personally am working now is a interplay between the personal notion of power. Only the Tsar, he has a personal authority to change the law, to change everything, in the attempt to build a state which a modern state by definition needs to work on the basis of rules, predictability or accountability, as you say. But you can see constantly going back and forth. And one example is the role of the governors, who are little tsars in their own regions. And they, how can I say, intersects the rule by law constantly. And it also has some geographical consequence. when there is a region that needs to be ruled and it is important, since the will of the Tsar is the most effective to get things done, so to speak, then a special committee is formed which can be faster than the usual bureaucracy because it already has, if the Tsar is a member of this committee or the Tsarevich, the heir to the throne, is member of this committee works well. So on the one hand, you have a state which becomes modern according to rules. If you like, we can follow the Weberian notion of bureaucracy, which by definition, in theory, as an ideal type, should be regular, predictable. But you have the personal notion of power that constantly breaks this accountability, impersonal functioning of the state. So I see many continuities, and I wonder, though, if one major difference with the Stalin's age period is socialism. Socialism, not when we say socialism, not just as an ideal and as an ideology, but socialism as an operative concept of building a society according to certain principles. Meaning, when Stalin issues the decrees of 1932 you were describing, is transforming society radically. Not even Tsarist serfdom was anything as close in changing society from above. There was much more space from personal, customary, individual, private, intersecting state activity. So here, there is a point in your book, you said this is almost a patrimonial state, in the sense that the state decides that almost everything except of personal property or ličnaja собственность belong to the state. The Tsarist regime never had this scope as an ambition, I would say, to transform society, which changes the scale, which is, personally, I'm not completely convinced about the usefulness of the category of empire applied to the Soviet Union. It's a different scale. It's a different type of authoritarianism, even worse in a way, but it's different from an empire, it seems to me. But that's enough.
Thank you for the comment. Alors, about this, of course, the continuity, this idea that the autocratic regime, the imperial regime, has a socialist regime a little bit less, I guess, as the idea that law is important, they love to rule by laws, and there is a symbolist value put in law. You see a continuity, especially under Stalin, actually, with Wyszynski, Andrei Wyszynski as a kind of incarnation of this high ideal of law. You are ruling by law, but you have also, as for the regular modern state, asking for exception. You really see that the people, they won't argue really against the law, but they really ask that the law don't apply to themselves because they are an exception. And it is a way to make a direct relationship between the one which could pardon or who could make an exception to the law. And it's also something which is very similar in terms of argumentation for other ordinary people. It's interesting also the comparison with the special commission. We were in charge of various territories. I haven't underlined it at the beginning, but this law of 32 and 47 were not really laws. They were decrees. There were decrees which make it more exceptional. That means that there are decrees and they should be implemented in all regions of the Soviet Union. Right. When in the Soviet Union, there were various penal laws and civil laws in various republics. And they were never able to have one unique penal code. Of course, there is not big differences, but the sentences are not the same and so on. That means that the decree by the center, it was a way to centralize and uniformize the territories. And that everywhere, even in Uzbekistan, and you have to enforce this new decision which was written during chaotic times from Moscow. And you ask the people, you are for the first law, it was half regularly people tribunals, half the political police tribunals, which means that it should be very effective, very studently, and all over Soviet Union, which make also something quite similar. The idea that the exception is a way to govern all over the territory. And finally, normally I quoted, but maybe I didn't understand it very well. It is the work by Diego Gambetta, which it is about the fact that the moment of modernization are paradoxically the moment where there were more patronage, more interpersonal relationship, because as modernization means destructuration of regular relationship, there is a creation of other one we are very necessary because you change the society. And for me, it could be counterintuitive, but it's sure that when you have a law like this break some behaviors, you have also the people are very active to try to find other relationship, and the patronage links are more active as well. And for sure about modernization, the Stalin project of modernization is one of the more radical you can think about with Mao and also after. But the radicality of the collectivization and the radicality and after the destructuration by the war and the recreation, the attempt to recreate the power and the economy after the war, make all this period incredibly chaotic and very radical in all form. And for the imperial period, I think you can locally see the same kind of moment where it changed radically, but it's not, of course, the same kind of project. And of course, it's a socialist project, but also it's a really project of industrialization, of modernization, and of economic growth and of extraction, of which is at the scale was never even imagined by the imperialists, the imperial bureaucrats.
Agree.
Socialist, I am not very sure, actually. Okay, you have to read the book and after to ask questions. We have to we have to plan a second round.
And well, going back to another question we mentioned before, the one of information spying, police economy. What you describe makes it perfectly understandable why the science, the perception, the understanding that the Soviet economy is not going well appears through the political police, the KGB, Andropov. Because they have
laws.
This network of surveillance, which is not the official one. The official one has to report, and then everybody lies to everybody. Whereas the other channel, which is the police one, so to speak, has probably, perhaps, I'm hypothesizing here, a better understanding what it's actually happening in the economy, and not by chance the earliest reformer, meaning not the only reformer, of course, but the first stage in the reform that becomes the perestroika afterwards comes from the police.
From Andropov.
From Andropov. So.
No, for sure. At the beginning, it was even very. I was very surprised because while there is this 47 decree, there were a lot of police reports. We were sent to Stalin, Molotov, and Politburo membership about, and it was a very qualitative description of cases. That means that they receive really many documents by the police about one cases of speculator, one cases of thief, at various scales. And of course, we don't know exactly to what extent they read it, but they knew, and they knew quantitatively and qualitatively. Quantitatively, it was, I tried, they normally have some statistic about embezzlement, but they were not able to make it really probant, even under Brezhnev. And we didn't know. Everybody knows, especially during Brezhnev times, that they were stealing everywhere. There were a lot of rumors about the corrupted society, but it was not able to get a really number about the level of the economy was influenced by this problem of stealing and embezzlement. And during Staline times, it seems to me that they knew about the economy through this, this narrative, this case narrative of things. I mean that there is no big data. They don't share data, but they share the narratives of, there is a case there is a case there, there is a case there, and so on. After it changed, because as you said, it's a major turn in terms of penal regime in Soviet Union after Stalin death, is the idea that to transform repression to prophylactica. Which means that you have to survey people, to have agents everywhere.
Before they commit the crime.
Yeah, before. And when you know that they will commit a crime, you just have a small discussion, and you construct all kind of society where you know that you both, of course, know the KGB. There were much people. There is more people in the KGB, more people in the party, and you have the construction of this society of surveillance, which was at the beginning during Stalin, which exists already. There were all these rules on agentura, but it was more theorizé as a mean to struggle against economic crimes, as political crimes, and so on. And at the time, the reports are more quantitative as well. They are more bureaucratic. You don't have the same kind of qualitative narrative about what is going on, and it's more, it's different. But the system of surveillance, the system of prophylactica was not targeting just economic crime. It was for all the societies. That means that it was the same thing in the university and in all social settings, just in order to also to make the population under surveillance, and it works not so badly.
Do you have any? Well, I think we can thank Juliette for her presentation and for sharing this, not just the results of her research, but also thinking about it in broader terms. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We are off camera.